As I said, we would be privy to seeing some things that are shocking even when we know it's going on. You know, it's one thing to read about it in a newspaper article or to hear it reported that this sort of open, virulent, hate-filled rhetoric has become common, but it's quite another thing to see it with your own eyes. Before I introduce our next speaker, there are two very distinguished guests that I neglected to mention in my opening remarks. We would like to welcome the Ambassador of Germany, who is here with us as well. Please stand up. We so appreciate your being here, and I think for anybody who has spent any time in Europe, we have to also say how grateful we are for the courageous and unambiguous stand that Angela Merkel has taken in confronting racism of every form, rearing its head in Germany, but very specifically anti-Semitism. So we thank you for that, and also for your cooperation on the Solidarity Sabbath. And I'd also then like to recognize Jeffrey Harris, who is the Deputy Head of Office of the European Parliament Liaison Office. Where are you? Thank you for joining us as well. We're so... Oh, yes, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, thank you so much for being here. We are so honored to have you. Thank you. Will you please come up and okay, thank you so much. Thank you for making sure it's a full room. I'm so grateful that you're here. It is next my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is a woman who has come here from France, for which we are enormously grateful. Caroline Fourest has been a fearless defender of freedom, of human rights, and of democracy and freedom of expression as a journalist in France for many years. She is a writer, a filmmaker, and an outspoken defender of universal and secular values. She has written numerous essays and books on fundamentalism, multiculturalism, and universalism, several of which have received notable awards, including the French National Award for Secularism and the Political Book Award. For 5 years, she was a columnist for Le Monde, and during the 2005 very well-known cartoon affair, she was a journalist at Charlie Hebdo, which, as we all know, was the target of that terrible attack just a short time ago. So it is with great pleasure that we welcome Caroline Fourest, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about this huge challenge that you have seen just a few extracts of it. I belong to a generation who grew up with this question about the Nazi time, how a continent like Europe can let something like this happen. It was the question during all my teenager time, how we can let that happen. But at this time, I was absolutely sure that I will never find the answer, that it will be a lifetime question. I must say I'm a little bit sad to say a few years after, I think I know. I don't know it from my education, my family. I do not belong from a Jewish family. I'm just obsessed by finding these answers. And I did work since now more than 15 years on extremism, all type of extremism, religious right in America, National Front in France. And since 10 years, I'm working a lot on the Muslim Brothers movement. I did work 6 years in Charlie Hebdo, in this amazing, amazing satirical newspaper where we can, in the same times, having the most genius and funny drawings about religion, all religion, and in the same times having very serious papers trying to denounce anti-Semitism, trying to denounce fanatism growing up in Europe. I've lost some of my dear friends. We knew in 2005 that we were in danger. We knew that it was dangerous to laugh about fanatics. And still, we thought that if a newspaper like Charlie Hebdo cannot laugh about what is the most scaring threats to all of us, then what we're going to do? Only war? If we cannot love, the only option is to do only war. But I think it is definitely a war that we can win not only by weapon, but by drawings and by words. So it is very important to use the correct words. And after what happened with the terrorist attack against Charlie Hebdo, against the hypercacher, and before that we had the murder of Jewish children by Mohamed Merah, and before that we had Mehdi Nemmouche in Belgium. So it has been now a few years that it is dangerous to be Jew in Europe, as it is dangerous to be journalist, as it is dangerous to be cartoonist. So it's becoming a lot for the 20th century, really, in a very fantastic democratic area of the world. Why it is becoming so dangerous to be journalist Jew, or a military from Muslim background, or an Arab policeman who have been also killed during the attack of the 7th of January. The easy answer is to say that there is people who are so oppressed in Europe, so poor, so desperate, that they have no other choice than to kill Jew, cartoonists, and journalists. I'm sorry to say this is a little bit what I'm hearing when I receive some journalists from America or England after the attack against the hypercacher and Charlie Hebdo, and the first thing they're explaining to me is that it is because France is Islamophobic. It is a little bit also the painful impress we've got when Barack Obama didn't find time to come after the attack, but did find time to say that apparently Muslims of France have a problem to identify themselves with the French model, and that maybe that can explain what happened. I don't know what people would have felt if someone after the 9/11 would go to America, or not go to America, but just to explain, I can understand why Muslims hate you. I think everything is wrong in that approach. Really, everything is wrong. First, if we have to speak about Islamophobia, we can speak about Islamophobia. There is Rabia Kadir in this room. And it's shocking to me that people can compare or not compare, they ignore the oppression, the real oppression of Muslims when it is under the China regime, when there is actually people who are really, really under discrimination, really humiliated for their faith. Compare that to a democratic, secularist country like France, where you are completely free to be and to practice your religion, where you are not discriminated for your religion. Just what is going on today, and I think it's important because it is what you're saying, the rise of racism always go together. And yes, today in France we are facing the rise of racism together, but there is an explanation of that. Is that when you have radicals claiming themselves, acting in the name of a religion, and killing people and strengthening people in the name of a religion, guess what? There is people who start to fear that religion. And we are dealing with that. And when we come from the left, like Charlie Hebdo, when we are both anti-racist and both secularist, we are in the middle of these two horrible approaches. We're trying to fight against the racism against Muslims and Arabs. And I have to say that before the 9/11, this racism was really going down in France and Europe. Because my generation is an anti-racist generation. We have nothing to do with the old colonial past. Actually, we are children of the people who did fight the colonization. So this racism was really going down at the precise moment where there is propagandists, preacher of hate, you've seen some of them, but there is so many more, who are using the crisis of identity of the third generation of migrants, the one who are not oppressed like their parents were. They're using this crisis identity to brainwash them. But not only them. We have to be clear about that. The people who can go today, after just few days of propaganda that they have seen on the website, who can be brainwashed at the point to go to Syria. Those people sometimes are blonde, with blue eyes, coming without no Muslim background, living in Normandy, and suddenly they want an adventure, they want to feel something very strong, and they decide to fight for a humanitarian cause in Syria. Before it was taking maybe 1 month to radicalize someone, today we know, and the specialists know, that it's taking only a few days to brainwash completely someone and send him to Syria. And sometimes it is a girl who thinks that she's going to help people who are suffering in Syria and will become a sexual slave there. Of course, it's not the paradise that they're going to find, it's hell. And after a few weeks, they want to come back in France very quickly. But in the middle of that, there is not only the radical who go to Syria and come back and can kill because they're hearing that the Jews are the problem. It's more than that. We have a movement, a grassroots movement, a very smart movement. Actually, it's the most smart totalitarian movement I've ever worked on it. Well, sometimes the first step to brainwash very smart people, not poor people, not lost people, not the people who can go in Syria easily. I'm talking about students, I'm talking about lawyers, I'm talking about very smart Europeans that they can brainwash. And this movement is the movement of the Muslim Brothers. They can be smiley, they can be very professional, they can convince governments here and in Europe that they are the good partner to deal with. On the grassroots, I can tell you really what they are doing in Europe. It's a mess. They are brainwashing a whole generation of brilliant and smart Muslim Europeans. And they have at this head of their Council of Fatwa, which is the Council, the European Council of Fatwa, it's the council who give the religious direction for the Muslim in Europe. And we know that the head of this European Muslim Council is Youssef al-Qaradawi, who said once in London, the only dialogue with Jew is with sabre, sword, and to kill them. He didn't say Zionist even, he said Jew. And it was in London. And it was received by the politician of London, the mayor of London at that time, very friendly. And every time we are helping a movement like this, we are betraying the real secular Muslims, like my friend Hassan Chalgoumi, who is here, who are fighting against anti-Semitism, who are fighting against those fanatics, who are fighting against radicalization, and who have been accused of being traitor to Islam. And here is the situation today in France. When you're denouncing the anti-Semitism, the racism of those fanatics, you've been called Islamophobic. You've been called being racist, just because you are against racism. So people are so fed up of this game that they're starting to vote for National Front, a real racist movement, a real xenophobic movement, where even if the old now father Jean-Marie Le Pen is going to be a little bit more in the shadow, because he's saying too obviously what he's thinking about the Jew, about the Maréchal Pétain and the collaboration, that Marine Le Pen do not want to have this speech in front of the party because it's not well seen at all in France. I mean, except in radical circle, anti-Semitism is what we all want to fight today in France. Even the National Front cannot claim to be anti-Semitic. He will lose the vote he's got today. So he will have, and he's trying to hide a little bit this part of the party. But the other part, the part against the radicalism in the name of Islam, is very popular. Is really, really popular. But there is only one way to fight against this. It's not by calling Islamophobic the secularist French. It's not by explaining that the French model is responsible for terrorist attacks who occurred in London, who occurred in Arab countries, who occurred in Muslim countries since decades. G.I.G. Joan did grow up in England, in a very good suburb. The English model is very different from the French one. Explain to me why, in the case, the model is responsible of terrorist attack, and in other case, it's not responsible. It's not making any sense. You want to reduce Islamophobia, we have to fight against terrorism, and Islamophobia will be reduced. We want to fight against anti-Semitism, we have to fight also fanatism and terrorism. It's simple as that. We have to fight against speeches inciting to hatred and stop to confuse them with freedom of expression. As we have to stop to confuse freedom of expression like the right to do blasphemy, which is the more joyful way to resist to fanatism, with racism. Because this war is a war that we're going to win with clear minds, with clear words. It's something to fight with weapons, it's something to fight with our minds, by being clever. Once we start to confuse blasphemy with racism, and once we start to tolerate incitement to hatred like anti-Semitism in the name of freedom of expression, we are becoming weak, we are becoming targets, and we're becoming stupid, coward allies of terrorism. And this is what we have to stop. Thank you very much.